Yes, as you can see, the spookiest day of the year is upon us once again. I've got a nice, refreshing glass of blood by my side, my hollow Ichigo figurine is looking positively menacing, and it's time to talk Halloween. Or at least it will be tomorrow at the time of recording. However, tomorrow we'll of course have a brand new episode of Bleach to watch, so that just means we've got to talk Halloween today instead. On a separate note, how great is it that Asnot is being introduced into the anime properly on Halloween of all days? They couldn't have planned it any better than that, and I am really excited for tomorrow's episode. However, that's not what we're talking about today. No. In the run-up to this video, I was trying to figure out what I could do for a Halloween-themed discussion this year. The last couple of years I've done a top 10 video of some description, and this time I wanted to mix it up a little bit and talk about something slightly different. So while I was trying to come up with ideas for a Halloween video, suddenly the realization dawned on me. Thanks to the 1000-year Blood War arc, Bleach now has ready-made the perfect topic for a spooky discussion. Thanks to a certain character's ability, Bleach now has its very own version of zombies. Yes, The Walking Dead comes to Bleach. The afterlife isn't just for ghosts anymore. And zombification in Bleach is a really weird concept, especially when you take into account that over half the cast is already dead. And yet Kubo used zombification in a really unique and interesting way that actually opened the door to scenarios that I absolutely wasn't expecting at all, to characters coming back that I definitely wasn't anticipating, and to some fanfiction level fight situations and matchups that ended up working out really well. Now, of course, this power does originate in the 1000-year Blood War arc, so moving on, there will be spoilers for that arc in this video. And after all, that is the scariest thing of all. So this idea of zombification as it appears in Bleach really centers around one character in particular, Sternritter Z, the zombie, funnily enough, Giselle Gewelle. Now, Giselle is a fascinating character in her own right, and I'm really looking forward to that eventual analysis, but for now, we're mostly going to be looking at her ability, the zombie, her shrift, the power it has, what it can do, the situations it creates, and the idea of zombification in Bleach in general. Really, at its core, the zombie is just another unique spin on being able to control someone's mind or body, but I think Kubo took it a step further to make it truly interesting and really stand out from the crowd, to the point where, in my opinion, it really watered down subsequent controlling abilities like the love and made them significantly less interesting when less time was being put into them. The zombie is actually showcased to us in different stages throughout Giselle's lifespan within Bleach, and each time it is depicted as being morbid, macabre, depraved, twisted. All of these things encapsulate Giselle in a nutshell, and her ability is truly terrifying to boot. But who is Giselle Gewelle, the person that this ability completely revolves around? She's a member of the Bambis, in my opinion the superior Bambi, easily my favourite of the four of them, a great design reminiscent of a cockroach, already foreshadowing this idea that she can't die easily, or at the very least is entwined with death somehow, has a really twisted and weird personality, and overall is used in a very effective way in the final arc. The first time we see the zombie being used is when Giselle joins the other Bambis in bringing down Kenpachi Zaraki and the 11th Division. When one of the Shinigami foot soldiers strikes Giselle in an effort to kill her, he manages to split her from her shoulder almost down to her waist, but in doing so, doesn't actually manage to kill her. Giselle is able to survive essentially fatal injuries. Yes, as Mayuri would note later on, the puppet master of the zombies is in fact a zombie herself. But her ability goes further than that when we get into this idea, this aspect of controlling other people. When she's slashed by this Shinigami, Giselle's blood spurts out everywhere, covering the Shinigami in the nearby vicinity. As soon as it does, her shrift, the zombie, kicks in, and the Shinigami begin to lose the feeling in their limbs. Suddenly, they become Giselle's corpse slaves, her puppets, and she can command them to do anything she wants. And basically, she tells these particular unfortunate Shinigami to kill themselves. What's interesting here is the zombie is depicted in a way that it would never be depicted again moving forwards. The Shinigami whom her blood touches in this instance are fully aware of everything that's going on. They obviously lose complete control over their own functions, but they know what's happening. They're terrified, they're asking for mercy, they don't want to die, but they kill themselves regardless. In my opinion, this is probably the scariest version of the zombie we actually see. While I don't think it's ever outright confirmed, because from this point forwards it seems like every zombie under Giselle's command is actually already dead. They are already a corpse. It seems like when Giselle splashes a Shinigami who is still alive with her blood, although they fall under her control, they're still aware of what's happening to them, whereas later on we see that she is commanding an army of zombies who seem to be more traditionally zombie-like. They are kind of slurring, they're growling, they look dead, you know, they look to begin to be decomposing, they have open injuries, and they basically just obey her every command. They are mindless zombies. Once the March of the Zombies battle actually begins against Mayuri, Giselle notes that she has been building up her zombie army ever since she arrived on the battlefield, which obviously makes sense. Giselle is a vulture-style character. She can go around, find corpses, and effectively bring them back to life, reanimate them in the style of a necromancer, and use them at her whim. And I think that is what we see from this point forwards. We don't ever see her splashing her blood on someone who is still alive again. And particularly with these lower level Shinigami, that is of course showcased through the fact that they now obey her every command, but they are like mindless beasts who just growl, who just grunt and amble and shuffle around like your traditional zombie. What's really scary about this power as well is that Giselle can effectively end your life in an instant. If you're a Shinigami, all it takes is a single drop of blood and you fall under her complete control. If you're a low level Shinigami anyway, we'll get into the higher captain class individuals a bit later on. Because Kubo kind of goes crazy with the zombie in a way I wasn't anticipating at all. I actually do quite like the zombie. It is one of the shrifts we probably see the most of. It's quite obviously quite clear what it does. It's quite concise. It makes for an effective showcase of powers, and the battle it's involved in is good as well, because the zombie as a shrift really gets a chance to breathe, ironically, and stretch its legs, and is utilised through a variety of really interesting situations. At the same time, the zombie also allows for a bit of messiness. Characters end up all over the place in various states of being alive or not, and it does make things a little more difficult to keep tabs on. You basically just have to accept that Giselle has been visiting nearly every single battlefield throughout the second invasion, collecting corpses, resurrecting them, bringing them back to life, and taking them under her control. When it comes to fellow Quincy, Giselle's power does have its limitations. She cannot take control of another Quincy while they are still alive. Giselle would have to kill them first before being able to use them. We see a couple of instances of this when Candice loses an arm. She asks Giselle to heal it for her, as we also see the zombie allows her to graft flesh from corpses and use it to recreate limbs, which is actually pretty powerful as well. But Giselle mistakenly thinks that Candice wants her to take control of her body using her blood, and is effectively about to murder Candice until she says, "Don't do that, that's not what I want you to do, I just want you to create a new arm for me." A more overt version of Giselle using the zombie on a fellow Quincy is of course when she murders her supposed friend Bambietta Bastabine, who is rendered unable to move after her battle with Komamura. Giselle finishes her off and then reanimates her as a corpse to do her bidding. Giselle's relationship with Bambietta is definitely a weird point for the series. Kubo seems like he was experimenting in some ways with what he could really get away with, it feels like. There's obviously a sexual overtone, this kind of domination aspect to Giselle completely controlling Bambietta, Bambietta begging Giselle for something, which again is a massive innuendo, even though that something she's after is actually just Giselle's blood to kind of keep her strong, to feed her blood, because that's what all zombies under Giselle's command need and want at the end of the day. They rely on her blood to keep them going, but Giselle takes some kind of sick satisfaction from this and kind of lords it over Bambietta as well. It's honestly a really strange, unexpected, but fascinating character turn. Giselle becomes a considerably darker and more sinister character than first expected. That, however, I will save for a Giselle character analysis. What's key here is that her zombies become dependent on her blood to kind of keep going. Interestingly, it's a two-way street, however, as Giselle's immortality, I put that in quotes, as I'm not sure she's totally immortal, but the way she kind of keeps herself alive is by sustaining herself by taking blood back from those that she's given it to, as we see when Bambietta is again nearly rendered immobile. Giselle bites into her to try and drain her blood back, you know, declaring it to be hers. It doesn't belong to Bambietta, at which point she smashes her head in to restore her blood. There's a lot of really messed up stuff going on with Giselle, with the zombie, with those she interacts with, but for the most part, that is the crux of it. The blood is at the center of this ability. It's what Giselle gives out to turn people into zombies, and it's what she must take back in order to keep herself alive after she's been seriously wounded, and it's also what the other zombies crave from her. Now, earlier when I mentioned that Kubo went absolutely crazy with this ability, what I was referring to was just how many people actually become zombies and how many characters of note have this fate befall them. When I first saw the zombie kind of take action, I thought maybe Bambietta was going to be it. Maybe a vice captain would be turned into a zombie at some point. I certainly wasn't expecting to see Toshiro Hitsugaya turned into a zombie. That's a pretty big deal, as at this point he is dead. Now, Hitsugaya is converted into a zombie before he dies, which means although he is stronger and more athletic than Bambietta, it means he has less free will than she does, because since he was alive, he still had a spirit, a personality, and Giselle is able to erase that completely. So this is a pretty nasty fate that one of the most popular characters in Bleach ends up suffering. At the same time, it is pretty cool though, because a zombified Hitsugaya is able to completely let loose. He is no longer held back by any sense of morality or any inhibitions he once had, as I've gone over in my video looking at the cold-blooded killer that is the zombie version of Hitsugaya. But I just really like that Kubo didn't scrimp on this at all. If Giselle really is going around the battlefield collecting corpses, then it makes sense that she would find someone like Hitsugaya who collapsed after his battle against Kangdu. I like that Kubo didn't let up. Hitsugaya probably would be captured and turned into a zombie. This whole transforming someone into a zombie feels like a massive violation. I think that's the entire point as well. To create a zombie out of a captain class individual, Giselle must get her blood into their heart, at which point her blood is then spread across their entire body through their veins, turning them this dark red colour, and essentially giving us a visual indicator that they have been completely infiltrated from the inside out and taken over. It's a really kind of deranged fate for someone to have. Like, Hitsugaya is basically gone at this point. Mayuri refers to him as being dead, he has been killed. That's really mad to think about, and it doesn't even end there either. Suddenly, towards the end of the battle, zombified versions of Rangiku, Rose, and Kensei arrive as well. So Giselle has really been going at it across the battlefield, amassing a powerful army. And so we can see the zombie turns out to be quite a unique variation on what's otherwise a pretty standard, a pretty tropey ability of mind and body control. Giselle really does feel like a puppeteer in the truest sense of the word. On the one hand, you've got her controlling Bambietta, but Bambietta still having some kind of twisted awareness. She's been murdered by Giselle, and one has to wonder how she achieved that as well. Probably just bashed her head in with something, knowing how twisted this character actually is. It's also kind of weird that the other Bambis just totally let it happen. Shows how little regard they have for each other, I suppose. But Bambietta does have some kind of awareness in there, some kind of spark of who she was. She's still able to use all of her abilities like that. She's still able to use all of her abilities and everything, but Giselle now just wields her like a meat shield, grabbing Bambietta and putting her in front of an explosion at one point. It's really screwed up. And then later on the other end of the spectrum, Giselle has taken over Hitsugaya, and then he has died as a result of becoming a zombie himself, so he has lost all semblance of his personality whatsoever, and she now commands him like a killing machine. And the same goes again for the other high-ranking Shinigami she's managed to take under her control too. All in all, fittingly, the zombie is kind of terrifying. It's definitely one of the creepier, one of the most unnerving abilities in Bleach, with some really quite disgusting undertones to it as well, that Giselle is exerting such and almost abusive control over these victims. It really does feel like a violation of them that she has got her blood into their heart, into their bloodstream, and now they are under her control to such a degree that Mayuri has to greatly reduce their lifespan just to get them back to normal. That he has to do some serious medical work on Hitsugaya and Matsumoto and Kensei and Rose to finally get them back to normal. However, this notion of zombification is taken to different degrees, as well as Mayuri reveals that he has his own zombies too. Interestingly for Mayuri, this feels less messed up than Giselle's one by far. For the most part, he seems to have just stitched together these Oranka, Dordoni, Saruchi, Lupi, Charlotte, and brought them back to life. Lupi's an interesting one because the entire top half of his body was missing after Grimjo finished him off, but they seem to have, to some degree, their own free will, although Mayuri does comment to Giselle that what fun is it to control someone who has no will of their own. So Mayuri's sadistic streak is still there, but it is cool seeing him bring back these old characters that people thought were deceased. Interestingly, where I think Kubo went really crazy with Giselle's zombification, I kind of wish he'd gone crazier with Mayuri's. It's really novel getting to see these characters again, but I won't pretend I was desperate to see the Priveron Espada. I was kind of hoping maybe Stark might show up or something like that. That would have been absolutely crazy to see. But nonetheless, it's a nice, this is what I mean by fanfiction-y moment, getting these Oranka back, having Mayuri fighting Hitsugaya, all that sort of thing made the March of the Zombies kind of battle royale really fun and interesting to watch. And when I say the zombie made things get kind of messy in the midpoint of the second invasion, this is basically what I mean. It's characters like Rose and Kensei being disrespected to the point of being zombified by Giselle, and then being re-zombified by Mayuri. He effectively replaces their blood, but doesn't bring them back just yet. He decides to take them under his control instead and create the Kurotsuchi Corpse Unit. So that's where things do start getting messy. Zombies show up belonging to Mayuri to take on someone who has an ability quite similar to the zombie in the Love, and it all just gets a bit weird from there on out. But that's basically it for the portrayal of zombies, the idea of zombification in the world of Bleach. It was an unexpected surprise in the 1,000-Year Blood War, to be sure. Giselle, Sternritter Z, the zombie, is one of the Sternritter to definitely get the most amount of screen time. She gets a proper battle with Bambietta against Mayuri and Ikaku and Yumichika and Mayuri's zombies and all that sort of thing. And it's cool though because you do get to see Giselle summoning this army of zombies that she has managed to accumulate so far in the battle. So the idea of zombies in Bleach, for me, the way it was portrayed, is a bit of a mixed bag. If anything, it feels like a weird idea that I wouldn't necessarily have been on board for, but actually quite liked the execution. It was really cool getting to see Hitsugaya let loose on Mayuri, and it's a nice way of bringing a character like Bambietta back as well, even if she is given some pretty despicable treatment. But that's it for this spooktacular Halloween video on the zombie and zombies in the world of Bleach. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of the power of the zombie and how it was utilised through the chapters we actually got a chance to see it. Whether it was against those initial Shinigami who could still tell what was happening to them, or whether it was in the broader sense of the battle, the march of the zombies involving Bambietta, Hitsugaya, Matsumoto, Rose, Kensei, an entire army of zombies on both sides of the fight. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear it. Were there any characters you wanted to see come back as a zombie that unfortunately didn't make it? I'd love to know that as well. Guys, I hope you have an amazing Halloween if you celebrate it. Make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't done already. Thanks again to all of my patrons. I really do appreciate your support. And until next time, I'll catch you later. And I'll see you then. That's good blood.